Boring history for sleep. How ancient Babylonians timed their day with shadows. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back thousands of years into the warm, sunlit streets of ancient Babylon. You're not in a museum or a dusty textbook, nope. You're there, barefoot on a clay path that's still cool from the night air. The scent of baked date cakes floats from a nearby oven, and goats bleat softly as they pass. The sky is a buttery blue, and sunlight is already slicing through the city's tall mud brick walls like golden blades. But don't get too comfortable. You're about to live a day in ancient Babylon. And spoiler alert, there's no phone, no clock, and the closest thing to checking the time involves squinting at a stick in the ground and hoping the sun isn't playing tricks on you. You probably won't survive this kind of schedule, but don't worry. Tonight you don't have to. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake with the city. There's no rooster, but you know it's morning because the light seeps through the lattice of your reed window. You stretch, the floor is dry clay, cracked and warm, and as you rise, the city around you does too. A potter begins to thump wet clay on a stone slab outside. Somewhere, a mother is already shouting at her son to fetch water. But the rhythm of life here doesn't come from clocks or chimes, it comes from light, shadow, and the old sun herself. You shuffle outside, the air still carries a chill, and the street is cast in soft gray. This is a sacred time, the edge of day. In Babylon, people knew the sun's habits better than we know our own calendar apps. Your neighbor, who fancies himself a philosopher, likes to say that the gods placed the sun in the sky just so men would stop being late. Historians still argue whether this was a joke or a deep cosmological belief. You glance at the tall shadow stretching across your courtyard. It's thrown by a thin stone pillar, carefully placed and carved. Your family's gnomon. Not quite a sundial, but close enough for now. Its shadow cuts across dusty lines etched into the ground, each marking the rough approximation of an hour. It's early, third line. Give or take. The Babylonians didn't use a 24-hour clock like we do. Their day was split into 12 parts of daylight and 12 parts of night. But these parts flexed with the seasons like stretchy pants. In winter, hours were short and snippy. In summer, they sprawled lazily across the sky. You dip your hands into a basin of cool water and splash your face. It's time to start the day. But where exactly are you in the day? For that, you'll need to consult the experts. High above the houses, sunlight gilds the towering ziggurat. The temple complex isn't just for gods and grand ceremonies. It's also where the smartest people in the city, the priest astronomers, spend their time charting shadows. They don't just mark the hour, they track the entire year. You wander down a path lined with baked brick buildings. The path winds toward the city center, where merchants are unrolling mats, displaying beads, goatskins, and baskets of garlic. As you pass a boy drawing spirals in the dust with a stick. He pauses to point at your shadow. Long shadow, he says wisely. Still morning. You nod solemnly. That's the kind of rock-solid science people understand here. If your shadow is long and stretches west, the day's still young. If it's stubby and hides beneath your feet, you're probably late to temple. And if there's no shadow at all, you're in trouble, or maybe just under a cloud. Babylon thrives on this dance of light and dark, and though it may sound crude, the city functions with surprising precision. Officials meet when the seventh shadow line is reached. Farmers plant when the first sunrise after the vernal equinox hits the north side of their garden wall. And grandmothers swear by the morning shadow stretch to know when to start baking barley cakes. Still, the system isn't perfect. One memorable spring, a traveling trader tried to argue that his camel caravan arrived before the ninth line, when clearly, According to your gnomon, it was after the 10th. Fists were shaken. Beards were tugged. Someone might have thrown a melon. Historians still argue whether this was a one-off brawl or part of a larger, deeply technical sundial dispute. You pass the old woman who sells cooled beer from her shady stall. She waves and offers you a sip. It's mildly sour, but fizzy and refreshing. Sun's still good, she says, nodding toward the eastern horizon. You've got time. The air warms as the city stirs. Chickens dart through alleys. A scribe unfurls a scroll. And above it all, the silent sundials of Babylon cast their ever-shifting truths across sand and stone. There's a slow kind of magic here, one you can't rush. You don't scroll, you stroll, and you don't count minutes. You count shadows. You cross into a quieter lane, the dust already lifting into the golden light. There, tucked between two low walls, is one of the city's oldest public timekeepers. A tall stone pillar, your district's official gnomon. It's about as exciting as a broomstick stuck in the ground, but people treat it with the respect you'd give a courthouse clock tower today. The shadow it casts stretches far, drawn across etched rings in the sun-baked earth. Some rings are deep and clean, others are fading, barely visible. Children sometimes play marbles between the lines, unaware they're knocking through time itself. You pause here, and for a moment, you just stand and watch the sun work. This is how you tell time in Babylon, with your eyes, your body, and a little patience. There's no ticking, no chiming, just a slow dance of light and dark that moves at the pace of breath. Even now, a temple assistant shuffles up to inspect the shadow. He kneels down, squinting, measuring the length with a knotted cord. His lips move silently as he calculates, and then he straightens with a grunt of satisfaction. He scrawls a mark on a clay tablet. It's official, the hour is turning. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians invented the very first sundial, or if they inherited the concept from earlier Mesopotamian cultures like the Sumerians. Either way, they perfected it. Their city planners built homes to face the sun in specific ways. Their priests carved meticulous diagrams. Their shadow readers, as they were sometimes called, were as respected as any scholar or merchant. It was a strange kind of honor, reading what wasn't really written, just a flicker on dust and stone. You duck into a small courtyard where a group of men argue over the markings on a broken sundial. One of them insists the base was rotated in a flood last year. Another swears it's cursed because his bread always burns right when the shadow hits the 7th notch. A third says, maybe it's just the sun being lazy again. There's laughter. Someone offers a fig. You think about the simplicity of it all, and how terrifying it would be to live without it. On cloudy days, Babylon loses track of itself. People loiter, unsure when to eat or pray. Markets hesitate to open. Soldiers delay drills. Once, during a particularly overcast week, the temple had to ring bronze gongs to tell people when to gather. And it caused total chaos. One vendor sold his dates 3 hours early. A bride was left waiting at the altar until sunset. But when the sky is clear, everything runs smoothly. The priests call it the blessing of the sky gods. You call it a relief. You wander toward a small plaza surrounded by clay brick homes and shops. At its center stands another gnomon. But this one's different. It's shorter and mounted on a wide, flat disc of stone. Lines have been etched into the surface like the rays of a sunburst. And you realize you're looking at one of Babylon's rarer instruments, a horizontal sundial. These were a bit of an upgrade. While vertical gnomons worked well in open spaces, these horizontal dials allowed for more precise hour tracking, at least when nobody stepped on them. A little girl darts across the plaza, chasing a goat. Her foot smudges the noon mark. A nearby shopkeeper groans and fetches a stick to redraw the line. Third time today, he mutters, goats and time do not mix. This is how ordinary life intersects with the science of shadows. Everyone's a timekeeper in their own way. Housewives angle their laundry racks just so, tracking light for drying. Bakers judge oven readiness by the shape of the door's sunbeam. Even thieves have a preferred hour, just before sundown, when long shadows confuse everyone. Some scholars believe Babylonian sundials were originally religious instruments, built to mark sacred moments like solstices and equinoxes. Over time, though, the knowledge trickled down from priests to scribes to farmers to fish sellers. It democratized. Time, like clay, could be molded by anyone who paid attention. You move again, this time toward the city wall, where the shadow of a tall gate cuts a perfect diagonal across the road. It's enormous and silent, like a sun-drawn sword, and everyone steps over it as if it might bite. You do too, just in case. Near the base of the wall, a patch of sand has been cleared, and in it sits a curious structure, a shallow bowl with raised ridges radiating from the center. A traveling mathematician calls it a hemispherical sundial, though you just think it looks like someone sat on a melon. Still, it works. When the sun reaches the right angle, its shadow crawls neatly along the bowl's ribs. 1 notch, 2 notches. It's precise in a way your courtyard stick never quite was. You lean down to inspect it. The sun is climbing fast now, and your own shadow begins to shrink. It feels like something is ticking, except there's no sound. Just light, and dust, and that ancient, soft hush of time rolling forward. Someone taps you on the shoulder. A young boy with a clay tablet in hand points toward the temple and says, "Mid-morning lecture. You'll miss it." You nod and follow. After all, you're not really here to work. You're here to learn. You reach the broad stone steps leading into the temple's learning wing, a quieter annex off the main ziggurat, humming with soft footsteps and scratching styluses. Inside, light filters through slatted walls, striping the floor like a tiger's back. A few early students are already seated, each with a wax tablet balanced on their knees. The room smells faintly of lamp oil, dust, and something sharp and sweet, perhaps incense or just very old papyrus. Today's lecture, you're told, is about constructing sundials, which is a bit like teaching someone how to watch paint dry, except here. The paint moves and the lesson lasts all year. The teacher arrives, a thin man in a worn linen robe, his beard precisely oiled and braided. He nods politely but doesn't waste words. Instead, he lifts a wide clay slab and plants a short bronze rod in its center. "Time," he says, "as a trick the sun plays on us." You glance around. Some students smirk. One yawns. "Unless," the teacher adds, "you learn to trick it back." He scratches a half circle into the clay with a reed stylus and begins to explain how Babylonians used basic geometry and long afternoons of observation to create sundials. First, they'd level the ground, because slanted sundials don't tell the truth. Then, they'd mark out the shadow's reach at various points of the day, notching where it hit every hour, or, well, every rough approximation of an hour. Historians still argue whether Babylonian sundials were accurate to the minute or more of a general vibe kind of device. Given the variability of sun angles, seasons, and someone occasionally stealing the gnomon to stir stew, most lean toward rough but effective. The bronze rod, known as a gnomon, stands straight, casting a stubby shadow that curls like a lazy snake. The teacher moves a pebble to its tip. From this, you get not just the hour, but the season, the sun's path, and, if you're clever, someone's approximate birthday. A girl raises her hand. "Even with all the shifting?" He nods. "The shifting is the point. No shadow is the same twice. That's how you learn." You feel oddly soothed. There's something reassuring about this calm, steady way of measuring life. No rush, no beeping, no constant reminders to stand, breathe, hydrate, or check your scrolls. Just the sun and a stick, and a shadow that moves as slowly as sleep itself. The lecture continues. The teacher unrolls a diagram drawn on aged parchment, a rare treasure, inked in soot and crushed berry dye. It shows a stylized city square with a central sundial. Lines radiate outward like a sunburst, annotated in ancient Akkadian. You squint and see something unexpected. Little symbols next to the hour marks. A goat, a side, a loaf of bread. These aren't numbers, the teacher explains. They're reminders. When the shadow touches the goat, it's time to milk. The bread, time to eat. The side, time to harvest. This kind of visual timekeeping helped the illiterate and the distracted. It's also how Babylonian kids learned their schedules, through stories, not numbers. When the lion shadow appears, you'd better be home. If the fish shadow touches the wall, you missed your supper. You wonder for a moment what kind of shadow would mark your bedtime in Babylon. Maybe a curled cat, or a closed door. The teacher finishes his lecture by inviting students to carve a small sundial of their own. You step outside into the sun-drenched courtyard, handed a rounded clay disc and a thin stick. The stick slots neatly into the center. You tilt your head, check the sun's angle, and jab the stick down. Now you wait. A boy beside you leans in. Mine's crooked, he says, frowning at his off-kilter disc. Maybe your shadow's drunk. You whisper back. He snorts. You mark your shadow's tip with a scratched X. Then you wait a bit longer and do it again. It's strangely meditative, this act of watching something that never hurries. A bit like cloud gazing, but with more math and fewer dragons. Someone nearby spills water, and it splashes your sundial. The clay holds, but the line fades. No matter. In Babylon, even time itself can be softened with a little water. As the hour stretches on, your small sundial begins to take shape. 12 marks in a wobbly arc. None quite straight, but all yours. You smile. Somewhere, far above, the temple astronomers are marking their own lines. Theirs etched with precision and backed by years of stargazing. Yours? It's for fun, for sleep, for slowing down. You sit back against a wall, sundial drying beside you, and let your eyes drift upward. The sun's moved just slightly in the sky, enough for a new shadow to fall. You watch it, and it watches you back, long, thin, and silent. No alarms, no deadlines. Just the ancient light of a Babylonian morning slipping softly toward noon. By the time you leave the temple's courtyard, your little sundial tucked under your arm like a loaf of flatbread. The city is sliding steadily toward midday. The sun hangs higher now, nearly overhead, and the shadows that ruled the morning are shrinking, pulling in like shy children under the weight of the heat. You squint as you cross the plaza. It's stone paving now hot enough to roast lentils. Shopkeepers huddle beneath strips of linen or palm-woven awnings. The smell of charred onions and fish paste clings to the air, along with something sweet, maybe pomegranate syrup bubbling in a pot. You pause beside a stall where a woman sells perfumed oil in small, corked vials. She waves you away, not rudely, just protectively. No one wants to argue in the sun. Here in Babylon, noon isn't just a time of day. It's a turning point, a pause, an invitation to step back, breathe, and let the sun finish yelling for a while. Most people avoid scheduling anything too precise around this hour because the shadows nearly vanish. You want to know what time it is? Too bad. The sun's at its peak. Your gnomon's shadow is napping. And so should you. You duck into a shaded archway near the granary, joining a few other citizens who've had enough of the glare. One of them, an older man with skin like baked leather, waves his hand lazily toward the sun. You can't trust it at the top, he mutters, too proud to cast a proper shadow. Historians still debate how Babylonians marked exact midday. Some believe they used twin gnomons and watched for the moment their shadows shrank to nothing. Others say it wasn't worth the effort. It was just a brief moment, better spent finding a cool spot and some diluted wine. You stretch out on a low wall. Around you, life slows. A stray cat pads into a patch of shade and collapses dramatically. A baker snores behind a basket of undercooked flatbread. Even the flies seem to hover in slow motion. Despite the heat, the city doesn't feel lazy, it feels patient. Timekeeping here isn't a frantic tally of minutes, but more of a rhythm you fall into. like music played by someone who doesn't care if you clap on beat. A young boy passes, balancing a tray of figs and honey cakes. You wave him over and trade a few small shells for a sticky, fragrant morsel. The sugar hits your tongue like a drumbeat, and for a moment you feel wildly awake. Then the sun glares down, and you decide that was a mistake. Still, some parts of Babylon don't stop. Even in the blaze, near the temple gate, you spot two apprentices standing beside a tall vertical sundial embedded in the plaza. They're arguing, gently, in hushed tones, about whether the shadow is leaning west or still holding center. One of them squints, then runs a wetted finger over a line carved into the base. They're training for the calendar room. Someone whispers, "That makes you sit up." The calendar room. Not many people get invited there. It's a shaded chamber deep inside the ziggurat, where priest astronomers plot not just days, but months, seasons, and years. They track the moon, the planets, and that great wandering troublemaker, Venus. Babylonian timekeeping isn't just about days, it's about when to name a month, when to end one, and what the gods might think about all that. You ask the whisperer, a spice seller in retirement, whether the calendar room has sundials too. "No," he says, "too sacred for sundials. Up there, they use stars and shadows both, but mostly silence." You consider that for a moment. A room where time is counted in flickers and dreams. You think you'd like that. The bell at the temple rings once. Not a time signal, more of a reminder. Afternoon is coming. You rise, brush the dust from your clothes, and step back into the light. Your next stop is the riverfront, where time is marked in another way, with buckets, boats, and babbling traders. As you follow a shaded path downhill, you pass a sundial made entirely of wood, brittle, split in places, but still proudly standing. Its gnomon is crooked. The marks are barely legible, but it's still there, like an old man who refuses to sit. A child stands beside it, waving his hand to block the shadow. "It's gone," he whispers, grinning. "It'll come back," you reply. He nods, then runs off. The sun pushes forward, tugging shadows west. They're longer now, thinner, stretching like yawns. You reach the edge of the river, the great Euphrates glinting like molten silver in the light. Boats creak lazily in the current. A fisherman uses the angle of the sun on the water to decide when to check his traps. It's a kind of clock only he understands. Nearby, a woman lays out herbs to dry, aligning each bunch with a stone to judge how fast the shade will fall across it. Timekeeping, here, isn't about power or control, it's about rhythm. You live inside it like a song. You hum along. You follow the river path until it bends toward the temple district once more. But now your destination is higher. The great ziggurat. The layered tower that looms like a sun-baked mountain over Babylon. From its upper terraces, you're told, the most skilled astronomers, often temple priests, track the sky not just to predict time, but to hold conversation with the gods themselves. You begin the climb slowly, stone step after stone step, winding past torch brackets, shadowed archways, and mossy nooks that smell of old rain and incense. Up here, time isn't measured with sticks in dirt, it's etched in the cosmos. The wind is stronger, the air feels thinner, your shadow grows short again as you ascend, then stretches long as you circle the far side and the sun moves behind the tower. When you finally reach the upper courtyard, the city sprawls below you, rivers, markets, rooftops, courtyards with gnomons sticking out like cactus stalks. But the priests aren't looking down. They're looking across, to the sky. A wide stone platform juts out from the tower. At its center stands a tall bronze gnomon, sharp as a spear, surrounded by a circle of engraved markers. Some are familiar hour marks. Others are symbols you don't recognize, stars, animals, even a crooked tree. One of the astronomer priests, cloaked in white linen that flaps gently in the wind, is charting something with a stylus on a wax tablet. He doesn't acknowledge you, but another acolyte, younger, smiles and beckons you closer. This is where we read the day. He says softly, not the hour, the day. You tilt your head. How? He gestures to the outer edge of the platform, where shadows from the gnomon stretch across carved grooves. Each solstice, each equinox, the shadow lands in a different place. From this, we know the seasons are turning. The calendar shifts. Historians still argue whether the Babylonians could truly predict seasonal cycles with astronomical accuracy or if much of it was ceremonial guesswork. Either way, you watch the young man trace a groove with his finger and feel certain he believes in it completely. The gnomon's shadow shifts just slightly, nudging across the line shaped like a crescent moon. The acolyte makes a tiny mark on his tablet. The light says it's nearing the month of sowing. He murmurs, soon, we'll offer first grain. You step back and take it all in. The height, the silence, the way the shadow seems to breathe across the stone. This isn't the same timekeeping as a market gnomon or a baker's oven mark. This is celestial choreography, a slow, cosmic ballet that few are invited to witness. The acolyte shows you another marvel, a hole drilled through 2 stone columns. At sunrise on the equinox, light pierces both openings and lands precisely on a golden disc mounted on the altar. We wait for that day. He says, that's how we begin the true year. You ask how long they've kept this practice. He shrugs, as long as the gods have smiled on us. You find a bench beneath a fig tree growing from a pot. The leaves rattle softly in the breeze. Above, 2 hawks spiral in lazy loops. You wonder if they, too, follow shadows to guide their lives. From this height, you can see where the city curves with the river. And you notice something you hadn't from the ground. The streets themselves seem angled toward light. Not random, not careless. Babylon, it seems, was built with sunlight in mind. Some scholars suggest Babylonian architects aligned city structures with sunrise points on holy days, an ancient form of urban sundial. Others believe the orientation was purely practical, better lighting, easier drying of goods, a more flattering midday shadow for market statues. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in between. You glance back at the gnomon's shadow. It's longer now, the sun inching westward behind it. Afternoon is here. You thank the acolyte and begin your descent. The stairs feel warmer underfoot, but your pace is slower now, more deliberate. It's strange, after hours without clocks or alarms, your body has somehow synced to the quiet pulse of this place. You feel the time, even without numbers. Halfway down, you pause at a niche in the wall where a carved lion watches the horizon. A small brass dial sits beneath its paws, another sundial. This one different again, with curved hour lines and strange offsets. You touch it gently. The lion watches. The shadow rests between 2 marks. You don't know what time it is, but somehow, you do. By the time you reach the city streets again, the light has shifted. Shadows grow playful now, stretching, bending around corners, climbing up the sides of buildings. Children chase them like they're alive. A vendor's sign creaks in the breeze, casting stripes across his bread stand. In a city that wreathes shadows, even the mundane holds meaning. You step back into the city's lower streets, where the day has tipped into that golden stretch of late afternoon. Shadows now stretch long and mischievous, slanting across alleys like lounging cats. The energy has shifted, brighter, more urgent. People move faster. Doors creak open. Ovens roar back to life. The marketplace, which had dozed through the heat, now reawakens. You wander between stalls and smell freshly ground coriander, roast lamb, and a type of fried dough that puffs up like an overconfident frog. Here, time isn't just marked by shadows, it's also tasted. Traders glance skyward, then at their gnomons, those sticks, poles, and columns now casting elongated lines that slither down walls and across scales. It's the final rush before dusk, the time when business is wrapped, debts are paid, and everyone tries to convince each other they're just early enough to be taken seriously. One woman, a seller of woven sandals, squints at the angle of the sun and declares, 3 hands past the 9th notch. You'll miss the evening bell. Her customer, a skeptical man chewing sesame seeds, replies, that's what your shadow says. They both look at a nearby wall, where a large sundial has been painted in ochre and soot. Its gnomon is fixed but slightly bent, warped by years of sun and possibly one too many donkeys rubbing against it. The shadow line is off-center. They argue, kindly. The sandal woman stands by her dial. The man insists his cousin's rooftop gnomon is more trustworthy. Historians still debate how standardized Babylonian timekeeping really was. Some inscriptions hint at official time posts, central sundials with known hour lines, while others suggest every neighborhood had their own interpretation of the day. It was both practical and charmingly chaotic. You pass a row of water sellers, broad-shouldered men with sloshing goat skin bags over their backs. One of them laughs and points to the shadow creeping up his cart. When it touches the wheel, he tells a wide-eyed child, I give out free cups. Really? The child asks. No, he grins. But it's fun to watch. You walk on, amused. Timekeeping here isn't just a science, it's a social glue. A conversation starter. A way to keep children guessing and merchants honest. It's also incredibly subjective. You reach the edge of the weaving district, where dyes boil in large clay vats, staining the air with the tang of copper and fruit peels. Here, the cloth dyers rely not just on hours, but on sunlight length. The gnomons in this quarter are small, often propped up next to dye pots. Cloth must steep for 3 full shadow stretches, not minutes. Blue cloth takes longer than red, and everyone agrees black is impossible to time unless you watch the sun and squint dramatically. You pause at a stone bench where a group of elderly men sits fanning themselves with date fronds. One of them is carving lines into a bit of broken pottery, repurposing a shard into a mini sundial. He catches your look and shrugs. For my garden, he explains, so I know when to water the coriander. Can't you just look at the sun? You ask. He grins. Of course I can, but the plant likes to be surprised. In this gentle moment, you realize something. Timekeeping in Babylon isn't just for scheduling. It's for storytelling. The story of when the light hits a certain crack in the wall. The tale of how your grandmother knew the fishmonger was cheating because the shadow didn't match the price. The argument over whether an eclipse delayed a wedding or just scared the guests into drinking early. You step into a quieter courtyard where an old statue of a lion stares blankly at a cracked sundial embedded in the ground. The lion's shadow is long now, casting its silhouette across 3 distinct notches, one chipped, one faded, one fresh. A boy is copying the lion's shape onto his tablet, tongue poking from the side of his mouth in concentration. Homework? You ask. No, he replies. Just seeing if the lion knows what time dinner is. You smile. You want to believe it does. Further down, a group of apprentices from the temple walks by, carrying small wooden boxes. They pause at intersections, comparing gnomons and arguing in quiet voices. One holds up a polished bronze plate, concave, almost like a bowl, and turns it toward the sun. The reflection glimmers, and a thin shadow draws across its lip. That's the traveling dial, one says, for field readings. Does it work? You ask. No idea, he admits cheerfully, but it's fun to say we have one. As the sun dips lower, shadows stretch longer still. They creep like ink spilled slowly from the base of each structure, spreading across courtyards and alleys, telling the same story in 100 quiet ways. The day is ending. Vendors begin to pack up. A man tugs a canopy down while muttering, "Last sale before the goat shadow touches the steps." Nearby, a baker claps flour off his hands and nods at his wife, who's checking their gnomon one last time. She smiles. It's 2 o'clock. And you're still wandering, guided not by clocks or schedules, but by the softness of light and the long, thoughtful trail your own shadow now leaves behind you. You pass a final stall, empty save for a sundial etched into its wooden table. A small clay sign next to it reads, "Guess the time." Win a fig. You do, and you don't. The stall's owner isn't there. So you leave the fig where it is, and let the shadow win. As you continue your meander through Babylon, your feet take you past the workshop district, where the clink of bronze and the scent of singed wood hang thick in the air. This is where tools are shaped, carts repaired, and clever minds tinker with new ways to make old things better, or at least shinier. It's also the unofficial testing ground for experimental timekeeping. You approach a small square with a curious centerpiece, a low, circular basin carved from smooth white limestone. At its center is no gnomon, no pole, no painted shadow line. Instead, it slowly fills with water from a narrow spout above, drop by careful drop. This is a clepsydra, a water clock. It's not as ancient as the gnomon, and certainly not as elegant, but it's practical. The idea is simple. Water flows out of or into a container at a steady rate. By measuring how full or empty the vessel becomes over time, you can count hours, assuming, of course, the spout doesn't clog, the wind doesn't blow water sideways, or someone's goat doesn't drink half your data. A burly man in a soot-streaked apron notices you lingering. "You like the sound of water?" he asks. You nod. "Me too." He grins. More honest than shadows. You can't argue with dripping. He lifts the clepsydra and gives it a gentle swirl. The surface ripples, catching late sunlight. "I use it to time my forge. When the third line's wet, I flip the blade. Doesn't burn, doesn't dull." Mostly, historians still argue whether Babylon fully embraced water clocks, or merely dabbled. The earliest known clepsydras date back to Egypt, but Babylonian versions were referenced in later cuneiform texts. They were likely used indoors, in temples or courtrooms, places where the sun's reach faltered but timing still mattered. The man points to faint lines scratched on the inside of the vessel. "Each mark is an hour," he explains. "But they stretch in summer, shrink in winter, just like shadows." He shrugs. "No time is perfect. Just pick one that behaves." You chuckle and thank him, leaving the ticking of drips behind as you stroll on. Your next stop is a small school tucked behind a bakery. Here, the students are young, barely past the age of climbing walls and losing sandals. But they're learning to read, to write, and more importantly, to watch. You peek inside. The teacher is leaning over a simple wooden desk, pointing at a sketch of the sun. "When it rises here," she says, tapping the edge, "you feed the chickens. When it's here, you wash your brother." A hand shoots up. "What if it's cloudy? Then your brother gets lucky." The room erupts in sleepy giggles. Even in ancient Babylon, the youngest minds learn the rhythm of shadows before they learn to count. They're taught which window sunlight hits at breakfast, which shadow line means your father's home, which creeping shade on the floor signals time to pretend you're asleep. One wall is marked with charcoal lines, a crude indoor sundial that uses the morning sun slipping through a narrow slit near the roof. At this time of day, the light stripe has landed just shy of the fish symbol. The children glance at it, then at each other. Fish means end of lesson. One whispers. The teacher sighs. Fish also means review your vocabulary. Sit. She catches you watching and smiles. Shadow learning. She explains. We have no bells, but we do have windows. You continue on as the children recite, their sleepy voices echoing through the clay corridor. Outside, a girl scratches time marks into the dirt with a stick, copying what she saw on the school wall. Her little brother stomps over them 5 seconds later. Such is life. Further down the street, you find a curious little building, half temple, half archive. The walls are lined with hanging scrolls and clay tablets. But what catches your eye is a metal fixture mounted to the floor outside. It's another water clock, but larger, more ornate, with delicate holes along the rim to adjust the flow speed. The steward here, a wizened man with silver dust in his beard, tells you it's used for temple ceremonies. We must chant the hymn for the exact duration of one bowl. He says, no more, no less, otherwise, the gods get offended or bored. Has it ever overflowed? You ask. He narrows his eyes. Once, a goat. Of course. He explains how water clocks are better for rituals, where the sun can't reach. And unlike gnomons, they can be standardized, portable even. A traveling priest can carry time in a bowl. He says, with something like awe. Still, most Babylonians trust shadows over water. Gnomons can't spill. Gnomons don't freeze. Gnomons don't get stolen and turned into soup ladles. But in dark places, in temples, tunnels, courtrooms and dream rituals, the water clock reigns. As you leave, you glance back at the clepsydra, a thin stream of water snakes toward the bottom. It's slower than your heartbeat, but steadier. Time, here, isn't about speed, it's about presence. The sun begins to dip low. The city tinted gold. Long shadows creep back into streets, turning corners into sundial pages. The gnomons of Babylon, humble and proud, begin their evening stretch, and somewhere in a workshop, a man listens to water counting down, not in minutes, but in drops. You drift toward the palace district, where the streets grow wider and the bricks beneath your sandals are smoother, flatter, cleaned more often, as if time itself passes more politely here. The buildings loom higher, too, their sun-baked surfaces adorned with etched lions and tiled dragons. Yet even in all this grandeur, the gnomons remain tall and simple, casting thin shadows across perfectly laid courtyards. It's no secret, in Babylon, time is not just sacred or scientific, it's political. You enter the outer gardens of the royal complex. Around you, lush date palms sway in the breeze, their leaves whispering over fish ponds and tiled walkways. A pair of servants unroll a scroll beneath a carved pergola. One reads aloud while the other points to an enormous sundial shaped like a lotus flower. The petals, you notice, aren't just decorative. Each is marked with faint cuneiform, denoting hours, prayers, duties, possibly even royal snack breaks. A palace official approaches the dial and nods with satisfaction. Perfect timing, he mutters. Then, to the air. The king always prefers audiences when the shadow reaches the third petal. You raise an eyebrow. Is that tradition? He snorts. It's personal preference. But when you're king, preference becomes tradition. Historians still argue how deeply involved Babylon's kings were in the practice of timekeeping. While some believe it was a divine duty, aligning royal decrees with celestial events, others suggest it was mostly ceremonial, with priests and officials doing the real work while the king enjoyed olives and power naps. Still, timekeeping served a purpose beyond scheduling. Inscriptions found in ancient ruins suggest that accurate solar tracking reinforced the idea of the king's connection to the heavens. If the king knows the shadow, one tablet reads, he knows the favor of the gods. You follow a corridor of stone lions to another courtyard, where an elevated platform holds a massive gnomon, easily the size of a small tree. Around its base, stone tiles are inlaid with gold accents. These lines, you learn, mark not just hours, but historical events, battles won, cities founded, oaths sworn. Each line represents a moment, frozen in the sun. A tour guide of sorts, dressed in a faded but finely stitched tunic, explains this was once used during public ceremonies. When the king stands here, he says, stepping onto a stone with a crescent emblem, his shadow falls on the record of past glory. That's no accident. You try it yourself. Your shadow wobbles across a tile marked with a starburst. The guide squints. That's the moment we celebrated the canal's completion. Big day. Lots of dates were eaten. He walks you through other shadow-marked events. One line recalls the dedication of a new temple. Another commemorates a solar eclipse, the one where, supposedly, the king stood in perfect silence as the sky went dark and everyone panicked. Apparently, he didn't flinch. People still talk about it. In a quiet alcove, you find a smaller gnomon surrounded by carved tablets. One reads, when the shadow reaches the lion's eye, Justice shall begin. This was, you're told, the signal for trials to start. Lawyers, well, whatever passed for lawyers back then, had to wait for the proper hour, lest they risk divine disfavor. Justice could not begin too early or too late. It had to be timed just right. Imagine that. No court calendars, no overbooked slots, just you, a judge, and a slowly crawling shadow across a lion's face. You begin to notice how the architecture subtly cooperates with the sun. Windows are angled to catch late afternoon light. Arched doorways filter rays into hourglass shapes. Even decorative pillars seem placed more for their shadows than their strength. One scholar once called Babylon a city built by light. Whether intentional or emergent, it's hard to argue when nearly everything you see points to the sky. You pass a group of palace attendants polishing the royal sundial with soft cloths and oil. One of them complains, "Last time, a pigeon sat on the gnomon and made us late for moon worship." Another adds, "At least pigeons don't lie. People do." It's an odd joke, but it sticks with you. In a place where time is interpreted by watching shadows, there's room for subtle power plays. A shadow read wrong could delay a meeting, shift a tribute, reframe a prophecy, and who's to say if it was a mistake or a strategy? You reach a hall filled with painted murals, blue, gold, deep green. Each depicts the king in various scenes, speaking with priests, lifting baskets of grain, standing under the sun with a hand raised toward a dial. These aren't just portraits, they're propaganda. The king commands the hours. One reads, "The sun obeys his line," says another, a little overconfident, maybe, but effective. You step back out into the light, the sky now softening into amber. The sundial shadows grow bolder, sharper, stretched long across smooth stone like brushstrokes on a giant canvas. You follow one as it snakes down a palace step and into the grass, disappearing behind a cluster of reeds. Even in this place of gold and glory, it's still the shadow that tells everyone what to do, where to go, when to begin. Not the king, not the bells, just the old, quiet sun. You smile. You don't need a title to read the time here. You only need to look down. You make your way back toward the heart of the city, down from the formal courtyards and royal lines of gold, past the merchant roads now bathed in slanted light. There's a hush settling in, but it's not the silence of sleep, it's the heavy pause before evening. When the world holds its breath, waiting for the shadows to finish their slow journey home, you follow one in particular, your own. It leads you past a small square where boys gather around a clay tablet scratched with numbers and figures. A teacher leans over them, eyebrows furrowed, gently nudging one child's hand into the correct stroke. They're studying multiplication, not with abacuses or finger tricks, but with cuneiform grids, columns and rows etched into wax or clay, dried and reused until they crumble. You pause, remembering how math in Babylon isn't just numbers. It's stars, it's bricks, it's shadows. The teacher notices your interest and waves you over. Care to test their memory? She teases. You kneel beside a student who looks mildly terrified. "All right," you say gently. "When does the shadow reach the sixth notch?" He blinks. Then, just after the bread man shouts, "But before the fig lady sings." The group erupts in laughter. Even the teacher smiles. "Not technically correct," she says, "but impressively localized." Historians still argue over the exact structure of Babylonian education. Some believe students followed a rigid system of astronomy and measurement. Others think the lessons were blended with daily life, measured, as it were, in shadows and supper calls. Either way, children learned early how the sun carved their world into hours. The teacher shows you a diagram painted on a clay shard. It's a rectangle divided by vertical lines, with small sun symbols perched along the top. "This," she says, "is how we teach the rhythm of the day. Each line marks a time when something happens. Open the windows, sweep the floor, chant the hymn, feed the cat." You ask if it's a calendar or a clock. She shrugs. "It's both. And neither. It's a map of being awake. You stay for a moment longer, watching the children repeat multiplication tables, some obediently, others dreamily, and then rise, letting the sound of numbers fade behind you. You continue toward a quieter district, where homes are smaller, and the courtyards are shared. Here, the gnomons are humbler, sticks in jars, carved notches on doors, chalk lines drawn in hopeful straightness. One home has a sundial painted directly onto the courtyard floor. The lines decorated with simple symbols: a loaf of bread, a jug of oil, a star, a door. You stand just long enough for your shadow to pass the star. From within the house, a grandmother's voice calls out, "It's time for stories." You smile. They've timed it perfectly. You wander past the house just as a group of children gathers at the threshold, bowls of stewed lentils in hand. One girl asks, "Is the star before or after the goat shadow?" "Depends on the season," says the grandmother, stepping into view. She's tall, draped in linen, with a voice that could command a marketplace or lull it to sleep. In winter, the star comes early. In summer, the goat does. This is how children here learn the nuances of seasonal time, not through charts, but through goats and stars and someone like her to make sense of them. You ask how she remembers. She taps her head. "The sun told me." It's not metaphorical. In Babylon, the sun is a teacher. Slow but patient. It gives no speeches, only signals, no lectures, only light. You sit with her a while longer. She tells a tale about a mischievous sunbeam that ran off with a priest's sandals. The children giggle. Somewhere in the city, a bell rings, not for time, but for bread. Still, the effect is the same. People move. You rise, thank her, and return to the street. Evening creeps in at an angle, pulling shadows across the baked bricks like a curtain being drawn. You follow it to a training yard behind a modest home, where two boys are practicing archery. Their arrows thud into straw targets shaped like jackals. Their father, a soldier, marks the training hour with a line scratched into the ground. When the shadow crosses that, he tells them, "You're done." One of the boys groans. "But the shadow's moving faster today." "It always does when you're tired," the father says, smiling. You ask him how long he's used that method. "Since I was their size. We used to train with the city guard, no sundials, just shadow lines and sweat." He points to the wall, where a sword is mounted beside a faded gnomon. "When that shadow hits the blade's tip, I go inside. No sooner, no later. Even warriors, it seems, bow to the rhythm of the sun." As you leave, the older boy calls after you, "Wait, what's your shadow hitting?" You glance down. Your shadow, long now, nearly touches a crack in the stone. You grin. "Dinner, I think." He nods solemnly. "Good time." You follow the lengthening trail of your own shadow toward a quieter quarter, one of community kitchens, tiny gardens, and open-air shrines tucked into humble alcoves. It's softer here, the city's noise muffled by clay walls and tamarisk trees. And here, too, the gnomons persist. In the center of a communal courtyard stands a surprisingly elegant sundial, crafted from smooth river stone and inlaid with bits of colored glass. You pause beside it and see a group of women gathered around a low table, stringing dried beans for cooking or perhaps decoration. One of them, her hair streaked with silver, notices your interest. "Pretty, isn't it?" she says, wiping her hands. "My grandmother laid those tiles," said the shadow makes her feel less alone. You crouch beside the dial. Its gnomon is slender, upright, casting a gentle shadow over blue and amber glass, each color corresponding not to hours, but to tasks. "Blue for prayer," the woman explains. "Amber for bread. Green was for washing clothes. But the dog ate that one." She laughs softly, and you can't help but smile. The sundial isn't just decorative. It's a kind of shared language, a subtle way to structure a day when numbers are scarce and time runs more like water than wire. Another woman joins in, her sleeves rolled high. "We use it like a song," she says, When the shadow sings on red, we need. When it lands on purple, we rest. This is one of the gentler truths of Babylonian life. Timekeeping wasn't just a masculine pursuit of priests and kings. Women, too, housewives, midwives, priestesses, scribes, watched the sun with care and purpose. Their days were mapped by its movement, not with grand declarations, but with daily rhythms you could taste and wear and pass down like a favorite spoon. You sit a while, sipping warm barley tea as they tell you how they keep track of ritual cycles. The waxing moon brings certain blessings. The shadow on the western wall means it's time to light the oil lamps. A crack in the garden gate lets through a streak of dawn at just the right time to feed the chickens. And when the floor tile turns golden in the evening sun, that means it's time to tuck the children in, even if they insist it's still playtime. Historians still debate how widely female timekeepers operated beyond the domestic sphere. Some suggest women in Babylon held formal roles as temple stewards or calendar attendants, especially in the goddess Ishtar's rites, while others argue their influence remained mostly within the household. Either way, their role in the city's quiet orchestration of time is undeniable. One of the women excuses herself and returns with a clay tablet. Not official or ornate, just a household planner of sorts, with symbols marking certain times of day. You recognize a loaf, a jug, a little stick figure lying down, presumably napping, and what might be a donkey or a very lumpy fish. This, she says proudly, was drawn by my daughter. Before she could write. You realize then that in Babylon, time isn't simply taught, it's absorbed, woven into the color of shadows, the scent of soup, the way afternoon light falls across a favorite bench. They invite you to stay for dinner. And you do, as the pot simmers and the bread rises in a shallow clay dish near the coals. You help chop herbs. Someone glances at the courtyard sundial and murmurs, "Just a little longer." The shadow hasn't touched the garlic mark yet. Later, they ask you to carry a small dish of lentils to the shrine at the far wall, an offering for the evening. The shadow there lies thick across the base, just beginning to brush the carved foot of the goddess. Perfect timing, they say. You step into the shrine's cool shade, place the bowl gently at the base of the statue, and feel something soften in your chest. It's not religious, necessarily. It's just right. The timing, the hush, the weight of dusk creeping in with purpose. You return to the courtyard just as oil lamps are being lit, small, flickering flames lined along the perimeter like sleepy fireflies. A little girl dances along the shadow of the gnomon, singing nonsense and laughter. No one stops her. You sit again, this time with a plate of warm food and a sense of being folded gently into someone else's schedule. A schedule shaped not by alarms, but by the earth turning slowly toward night. You ask the woman beside you if she ever uses a clepsydra. She laughs. "Oh no, I tried once, but I spilled it on the cat. Gnomons are safer." She nods. "And if the sun misbehaves? Well, we just do things when we feel like it." The shadow on the courtyard sundial stretches across the green mark, brushing the edge of a broken blue tile. "Time to sing," she says, and begins a soft melody in a language you don't understand but instantly feel. You close your eyes, and you let the shadow sing too. You rise slowly from the courtyard, bellies full and laughter still trailing behind you, and follow the gentle hush of the city as it winds toward its most sacred place, the towering ziggurat. But this time, you don't climb to its observation decks or speak to its scholars. No. Tonight, you're heading somewhere far more hidden, deep into its belly, to the shadowed chambers only a few have ever entered. The temple priestess you met earlier agreed to show you something special. She walks ahead of you now, her linen robe whispering across the floor, carrying a small oil lamp that throws dancing light against the clay walls. "This way," she says softly, "into the place where shadows rest." You descend a narrow staircase carved into the stone, its steps worn smooth by centuries of patient feet. The air grows cooler, stiller. You pass walls etched with stars, lions, and spirals, ancient graffiti or sacred geometry? No one knows. At the bottom is a chamber that smells of dust, oil, and something older. The room is square, quiet, and strangely peaceful. No idols, no offerings, just a tall central column rising from the floor and disappearing into a shaft above. It's pierced with a single hole, small, perfectly round, cut in the ceiling far above. You step into the room fully. The priestess explains. This is the temple's alignment room. During certain days of the year, equinoxes, solstices, light from that hole lands perfectly on one of the floor stones. You look down. The stones are each slightly different in tone. Some smooth, some etched, others with faint symbols. A scythe, a sickle, a rising star. Is it for timekeeping? You ask. Time, she says, and truth. The light shaft isn't active now. It's too late in the day. But she gestures to where the last beam landed earlier, on the stone with a crescent mark. Month of mourning, she says. It just began. You shiver slightly, but not from cold. There's something powerful about this. A way of tracking time not by the sun's path, but by where its light dares to touch. Historians still argue whether this was intentional architecture or a cosmic coincidence. Some believe it was Babylon's way of testing the heavens. If the light doesn't land where expected, the gods must be displeased. Others say it was simply the earliest version of a calendar room, used to refine lunar cycles and forecast rituals. The priestess pulls a tablet from a nook in the wall. On it are dozens of tiny marks, scratches too faint to read. These are shadow records, she explains. Scribes would sit in silence, watching where the light landed each day. Some worked alone for years. The quiet made them careful. You imagine that, waking before dawn, descending into darkness, and waiting, just waiting for the sun to draw a line on the floor. Day after day, season after season, you don't need noise to know what time it is down here. You need patience. She lets you hold the tablet. It's heavier than expected. You feel the press of years in your hands. Along the chamber's edge, another stone catches your eye. This one bears a swirling spiral, not a time symbol. Exactly, but something more abstract. The priestess follows your gaze. That one's still a mystery, she admits. Some say it's a map of the stars. Others believe it marks the day the shadow disappeared. Disappeared? You echo. She smiles cryptically. A cloudy month. The sun stayed hidden. The shadows took a vacation. You both laugh softly. The idea of Babylon pausing because the sun couldn't be bothered to show up is absurd, but oddly charming. As you prepare to leave, she lights a second oil lamp and sets it near the base of the column. Its light flickers across the walls, casting 1,000 tiny shadows. Not the sun, but still a kind of time. You ascend the steps again, the air warming with each rise. At the top, dusk greets you with a warm sigh. The ziggurat's outer terraces are bathed in deep amber now. Long lines stretch eastward, shadows of towers, pillars, trees, even your own shadow, cast by lamplight now, seems to wave a slow goodbye. You turn to thank the priestess, but she's already walking away, a fading silhouette in the half-light. No farewell, just a nod, as if to say, time is always moving. You don't stop it, you simply follow its path. And so, you do, as you walk back down toward the city, the ziggurat rising behind you like a stepped sunset. You notice something new. Carved into the base of one wall is a series of dots and notches. It's a calendar, not lunar, not solar, but shadow-based. Each day, someone has marked where the ziggurat's shadow landed at sunset. Day by day, season by season. Some lines are close together. Others jump like missing teeth. One has a little clay face drawn beside it. Perhaps the shadow landed just right on someone's birthday. You add a notch of your own, not official, not sacred, just a soft line in the clay. Your line, your time, as the final blush of sunlight begins to fade from Babylon's sky. The city slips into something looser, gentler, a collective exhale. But even now, The passage of time remains a quiet companion, guiding every motion, every meal, every melody. And tonight, as luck, or mischief, would have it, Babylon is preparing for a festival. You catch the first signs just as you re-enter the neighborhood near the river. Bright fabrics being draped across archways. The smell of date syrup bubbling over coals. Children racing in packs, faces already sticky with anticipation. And everywhere, gnomons are being ignored. Don't bother, a man chuckles, pulling down his courtyard sundial. During the festival, the sun dances however it pleases. It's a curious truth about Babylonian life. Time bends around ritual. Most of the year, shadows rule, but when the calendar calls for celebration, especially the lunar festivals, everything shifts. Time becomes elastic. Meals happen when the drums begin. Prayers are said when the first torch is lit, and no one asks what hour it is because, frankly, who cares? You walk through the gathering crowd, noticing the chaos. Two merchants are arguing about whether the feast began before or after the moon's first rise. A priest tries to restore order by consulting a lunar tablet, but it's smudged with honey. Someone laughs, someone sings, someone insists that shadow length doesn't count tonight. Historians still debate whether Babylonian festivals followed strict timekeeping or simply used celestial events as vague markers. Some texts list specific moon phases for rituals. Others imply that as long as people showed up before the food ran out, it was good enough. You reach the central square where dancers circle around a fire pit, tambourines jingling in time with footsteps. An elderly man beside you mutters, "We were supposed to start at moonrise, but the moon's late, or we're early." No one agrees. "Didn't the sundial help?" you ask. He chuckles. "That old thing? I threw a scarf over it. Better not to know tonight." In one corner, a small girl stands beside a tilted gnomon, watching its fading shadow creep into nothingness. She whispers to her mother, "Is it broken?" Her mother kneels, smoothing the girl's curls. "No, love, it's just resting. Shadows don't work during music." And there it is. That quiet rebellion against order. A kind of unspoken agreement that sometimes time should step back and let joy take over. You drift toward a makeshift table lined with sweets, fig cakes, sesame balls, roasted chickpeas glistening with syrup. A boy hands you a small wedge of honey bread and says solemnly, "This is the time cake." "Why?" you ask. "If you eat it before the drums, the year goes backward." "Oh no," you whisper, taking the tiniest bite. He nods in approval. You ask around, trying to find someone who still cares what time it is. One temple scribe, already halfway into his wine, shrugs. "The moon tells us when to begin. The stars tell us when to sleep. The rest is just candlelight and luck." Above, the sky has grown darker, dotted with early stars. The moon, round and gentle, finally slips into view. A hush passes over the crowd. Then a cheer. The fire is lit. The festival begins. You think back to the structured precision of the sundials, the water clocks, the temple alignments, and yet, here, not a shadow is being measured. No gnomon is consulted. Time is happening in feelings, not increments. There's something freeing in it. A different kind of accuracy. One that doesn't care if the bread rises on cue, as long as it's shared. One that measures moments by laughter, not light. You dance with the crowd. Slowly, gently, the rhythm easy to follow. Not choreographed, but familiar. Every footstep seems to echo something older than clocks, perhaps older than the sun itself. Later, you slip away to the edge of the square and find a small bench. The moon's light makes soft silver puddles on the ground. There, someone has drawn a crude circle with a stick, a makeshift lunar dial. The moon's shadow barely registers, but it's there, a whisper of time, reluctant to speak too loudly tonight. You glance at your own shadow, faint, fuzzy, relaxed. It doesn't seem interested in schedules. It just wants to sit beside you. Someone approaches. A young girl with henna'd palms and a garland in her hair. She offers you a small clay disc. What's this? You ask. It's a festival sundial, she says proudly. It doesn't work. You turn it over. True enough. No lines, no markings, just a tiny smiling face scratched in the center. It tells you, she adds, when it's time to smile. And with that, she twirls away. The sun is long gone now, tucked beneath the edge of the world, and Babylon lies blanketed in soft lamplight and flickering hearts. Yet even without the sun, the question of time persists, nagging in the corners, whispered over oil lamps, mumbled by tired workers, and when the moon hides behind clouds or the water clock runs dry. What's left to guide you? You find yourself in a side street near the Potter's Quarter, where the echoes of festival drums still bounce faintly off the clay walls. Here, a more grounded kind of chaos unfolds, a shadow dispute. Two neighbors, both weathered, both animated, stand on opposite sides of a shared wall. Between them is a carved sundial mounted into the bricks. Its gnomon bent, perhaps from wear, perhaps from being kicked during a recent argument. She moved it, one insists, pointing dramatically. She twisted it east when I wasn't looking. The other gasps, I haven't touched it in 3 moons. Yours is the one that's off. The goat shadow came early this morning. You edge closer, curious. Around them, a few onlookers nod knowingly. In Babylon, you've learned, nothing gets the neighborhood buzzing like a good sundial feud. Apparently, it all began last week, when one of the women accused the other of harvesting herbs before the proper shadow line. Since then, they've compared, recalibrated, and now question the very integrity of their timekeeping system. A younger woman chimes in from a balcony. You're both wrong. My father's rooftop gnomon says you're living in next week. The crowd laughs. Someone offers dried apricots to diffuse tension. Historians still debate whether there were any formal attempts to standardize sundials in Babylonian neighborhoods. Some believe priests would occasionally declare official shadow times, while others suggest everyone simply trusted the most confident voice within shouting distance. You kneel beside the sundial in question. Its gnomon does seem wobbly. The hour lines are uneven, and the base appears to have shifted slightly, maybe during last month's storm, or possibly when that goat wandered through with an attitude. Still, the sundial's intention is clear. It's not broken, it's just tired. I think, you offer gently, your dial may be telling festival time. The neighbors pause. One raises an eyebrow. You mean, wiggly time? Exactly, wiggly, festival, time. Very prestigious. After a beat, they both nod. Wiggly time. The elder repeats. Must be why the bread burned. You help adjust the gnomon slightly, nestling a flat stone under its base. It's not perfect, but neither is time. In Babylon, that's part of the charm. You walk on, deeper into the residential maze. Lamps flicker in windows, casting short, twitchy shadows onto the street. Here and there, you spot sundials etched into thresholds, painted beside doors, or laid into gardens. Some are clearly decorative, others are functional-ish. One is shaped like a fish. Another is carved into a discarded tablet of multiplication problems. A third, delightfully ambitious, is made entirely of dried dates stuck in clay. It has no shadow now, only the memory of one. You come to a corner where a small crowd has gathered around a raised platform. A local storyteller is reciting the tale of the shadow that ran away, a Babylonian fable. Apparently, about a boy who refused to do chores unless his gnomon said it was the right time. So, the storyteller says, voice low and dramatic, the son took pity on the gnomon and let it rest. And the boy, he learned you can't skip sweeping forever. A girl in the front row leans in. But how did he know when to sweep again? The storyteller smiles. When his mother shouted, laughter ripples through the crowd. You realize something tender in this moment. In Babylon, sundials aren't just for scheduling. They're embedded in the stories people tell each other. The way a parent might say, it's lion shadow time, go wash your hands. Or a lover might whisper, "Meet me when your courtyard line kisses the third brick." You ask one man if he ever argues with his sundial. "Not since I accepted it has moods," he says cheerfully. "Some days it's precise, other days it's dreamy. What about cloudy days? We guess, or we wait, or we nap." He winks. Time always comes around eventually. As the night deepens, fewer and fewer people pay attention to the shadow casters. Not because they've lost interest, but because they've moved into a different kind of time now. One measured by song, by yawns, by the soft scrape of a broom against clay. You stop by a home where someone has strung a line of sundial-shaped lanterns across the yard. One glows green, another pulses gently in orange. Each one casts a faint imitation of a shadow on the ground. "It's my art," says a young woman nearby. "Shadowlight. It's beautiful," you tell her. She smiles. "My father thinks it's nonsense. But I say, if you can't tell time with it, at least it makes you feel something." And perhaps that's Babylon's greatest wisdom. Time is not just measurement. It's presence. It's patience. It's a conversation between light and matter, one that might shift slightly from house to house, from dial to dial, and from one stubborn neighbor to the next. You head home beneath a sky scattered with stars. No shadows now, only the memory of them, still stretched across the walls, still marking hours long past, still telling you that the day was real, that it mattered, that you were here. The streets are mostly quiet now, Babylon settling into its nighttime rhythm like a great lion curling up for sleep. Yet even in this lull, you sense the subtle presence of time pressing on. Not ticking, not chiming, but breathing. Stretching across the city in the hush between footsteps and the glow between oil lamps. You make your way toward the edge of town, where the buildings thin out, and the air carries the cool tang of nearby fields and distant rivers. Out here, time moves slower, or at least, it pretends to. Along a dirt path, you come across an old man seated on a woven mat beside a simple wooden cart. At first glance, you assume he's resting. Then you notice the objects spread carefully in front of him. Sundials of every shape and size. Some chipped, some elegant, some barely more than scratched stones with a stick stuck in the center. "Trade?" he asks, nodding at you. You kneel to look closer. Each sundial is marked with subtle differences, some calibrated for summer, others carved with crescent grooves, one shaped like a turtle. They're from all over, the man explains. Not just Babylon, Persia, Elam, even one from a caravan that swore it came from Egypt. You pick up a small piece shaped like a half-shell. It's smooth, delicately etched, with tiny holes marking what must be hours. "Does it work?" you ask. He grins. "Only when the sun loves it." That seems to be the unofficial motto of Babylonian timekeeping. Effective when adored, confusing when cloudy. You sit with him for a while, admiring the strange variety. He points out a design that was once popular in Mari, flat, circular, meant to be laid atop a basket lid. Good for traders, he says. Could track time while you haggled. Did it help? You ask. Only if your buyer respected the sun. Historians still argue how far Babylon's timekeeping innovations spread. Some archaeological finds suggest that neighboring cultures borrowed and reinterpreted Babylonian methods, merging them with lunar systems or inventing hybrid devices. Others claim the flow was two-way, with Babylon absorbing foreign ideas just as often as it exported them. Either way, it's clear that time didn't stay still in Babylon. It wandered, it traveled. The old man gestures to one particularly bizarre sundial, bent like a question mark and carved from green soapstone. "That one," he says, "came from the mountains." The shadow moves backward, or maybe the hours do. You raise an eyebrow. "Useful?" He shrugs. "Depends how you feel about confusion." You continue down the road, and before long, you reach the banks of the Euphrates. The river glows in the starlight, long and patient, moving like a sleeping serpent through the land. Here, too, time lingers, measured by water. not shadows. You sit on a flat stone near the shore, where someone has embedded a small sundial in the earth. It's clearly ceremonial, not meant to be used at night. But still, it feels important, like a marker for those who wake early or dream late. A fisherman walks by, a bundle of nets slung over his shoulder. He nods. That dial tells me when the fish forget to hide. You glance at the moonlit disc. It doesn't work now. It's not supposed to. He replies. At night, I trust the river. Further upstream, you spot another strange construction. A kind of stepped platform, with notches carved along the edges. You approach it and realize it's a hybrid, half sundial, half water gauge. Marks measure both shadow fall and water rise. A dual calendar of sorts. An inscription, weathered but still legible, reads, "When both are full, plant nothing. When both are empty, run." You chuckle. Cryptic. A voice behind you adds, or very specific, if you're a farmer. You turn to see a woman in a plain linen robe, her hands stained with river silt. She introduces herself as a keeper of the Floodwatch, a group responsible for tracking the river's rise and warning villages when it's time to harvest or flee. She explains how these dials are consulted at dawn, when the light first brushes the stones. Some years, she says, the shadow never reaches the last notch. That's when we know something's changed. You ask what happens then. We rewrite the lines. She says simply. You sit together for a moment in silence. The river flows. The night hums. Somewhere in the city behind you, a clay tablet is drying under the stars, etched with someone's attempt to fix time in place. It will fade. It will crack. But for now, it records the moment. You ask the woman if she prefers the gnomons or the river. Both, she says. The sun shows us now. The water shows us soon. You thank her and rise to leave. As you walk back toward the city, the stars wheel above you, slow and ancient. You wonder how many other civilizations are out there, watching shadows stretch across walls, asking the same question. Is it time yet? And then, you smile, because you already know the answer. You return to the city through its quieter western gate, where the guards sit half asleep and a dog keeps watch more faithfully than they do. The energy is soft now. Babylon, which rose to the sun's cue and danced through the festival moonlight, is slowly folding itself into sleep. The walls breathe with heat left over from the day. The streets are nearly empty, save for a few late-moving shadows cast by oil lamps and stars. You pause outside a low wall etched with markings. It's subtle, easy to miss, but you recognize the familiar radiating lines of a horizontal sundial. It's been long forgotten. Its gnomon broken, the markings nearly erased by time and weather. And yet, even in its silence, the dial still sits there, still facing the stars, still remembering what it once did. You crouch beside it and rest your hand over one of the faded lines. You're not trying to read the hour now. You're just saying good night. You wander toward one of the ziggurat's smaller gardens, a place you haven't seen before. A narrow path leads you between tall reeds and flowering herbs that release sleepy scents, basil, mint, jasmine. There's a sundial in the garden too, but it's made of living things. Tall sunflowers bending gently with the wind. Their shadows traced across a gravel bed. Someone, probably a temple scribe with a poetic streak, has placed stones at the flower shadows' tips. "This one's mine," says a quiet voice. You look over. A young woman stands nearby, holding a clay jug of water. She nods at the sunflower. It tracks morning best. Around the 6th hour, it points toward my brother's name. You ask why she uses flowers. "Because they forgive," she says. "If I miss a line, they keep growing anyway." You sit on a low bench as she waters each plant gently. There are no harsh lines here, only curved stems, rustling leaves, and soft shadows that barely stretch across the pebbles. You talk for a while, about nothing and everything. About how some people spend their lives chasing shadows while others just let them pass. About how the city measures hours in goats and gossip, light and laughter. Eventually, She finishes her work and smiles. It's almost time, she says. For what? She points upward. And there it is. The first glow of dawn. It's so faint, you might miss it if you blink. But once you see it, you feel it, a shifting in the sky's tone, a quiet clearing of the stars' throats. The last shadow of the night slips away behind a garden wall. You rise, and you follow, back through the city, past the homes still breathing sleep, past the empty square where lanterns still swing from last night's joy, past the gnomons now ready to stretch again, past the clepsydras that wait for their next drop. You find your way to the temple steps, one final climb, one final glance, and from the top, you watch as the new day begins. Light spills across the city, soft and slow, and just like that, Babylon is reborn. And now, the city lies quiet beneath the weight of morning. The first calls of merchants haven't yet begun. The gnomons, still cool from the night, haven't yet cast their first decisive shadows. There is, in this suspended hour, a softness to everything, a stillness that feels like a breath held at the edge of a new day. You remain where you are for a while longer, letting the golden light warm your skin. The breeze carries the scent of wet clay and dust, familiar, comforting. Below, a single curtain is drawn back. A rooster lifts its head, but doesn't crow. Even the birds seem reluctant to break the peace. And all around, across walls and courtyards and rooftops, the sundials begin their quiet work once more. Not urgently, not precisely, just slowly, patiently, like old friends returning to a ritual that never needed perfection, only presence. You think of all the people you met, the boy with the crooked sundial, the grandmother singing by the shadow line, the priestess who showed you the light's secret language, each of them living their days not by ticking seconds, but by watching where the light goes. It reminds you that sometimes, life doesn't need to be counted, it only needs to be felt. So now, let your eyes close, let the memory of soft shadows linger behind your eyelids, let the rhythm of ancient light carry you gently into sleep. You've wandered long enough, it's time to rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.